Ko le beke o whangate ngai whatapko tō pēutu tō whakea tō mei he whaleni. Ka tama ke whakanga tono atu i e pungpongi o e Antony. Mei he whale whapure anga St. George, mei loto Nuku'alofa. Ai whamatalanga tono koe ni. O ta tau i he le tio e whaima walwhito poine ni ma. Peke pesi Facebooka, Broadcom FM Broadcasting. Koe ahoni koe aho mau inga eni. Peo tau whawhetai ko tau peki e o tua mawhi. Ko i koe la koe whiele leia e na awhi whio. Tamatu i ko tupo no. Mai e taine koe ni nana spau u. Peke whare o hamo heofo. Lau mai lelei e kpalemia e whanua mai kautake o pure anga. Peke kautake lotu i e whanuani. Io aonga olive pure anga mo siasi kai malohi ai ki whanua koe ni ko Tonga. Koe aho ene o whailonga i ai a ahi makehe mai ki he Pasifiki ka ki Tongani ai Egg Minister ki muri koia ai pure anga Amerika Antony Blinken ka ko iloa peia i anga koia o e fotu utu o ngahi lakanga koia a Amerika i loa koe skeitari ki muri. Kei hono whatatau me koea ki Tongani koe Egg Minister ia ki muri. Nea ngau ui koe skeitari ki muri. Kai ke. Koe whatongia whokoni o kaha molofia ai ahia o tau ki whanuani. E kau taki maalunga koia me ngahi whanua i tō preanga tau te whito a te kinau tolu. I ngahi lakanga maalunga koia o e pureanga. Oku i kai ko haa toki fofua taime nia ke a ahi mai ai tokotahani ke wheitu tahi koia e Pasifiki. Ko tuolahi pe ane a ahi mai i he kuohiri ke ngahi whatahaanga wha Pasifiki. Neongo koe ne toki a ahi mai ni ki Tongani. I ono lakanga koia koe Egg Minister koe ki muri. Aia koe talo pe foki a hono foto koia o e preanga fo oko Amerika. Pea moe take e Palestini Biden koe totaha koe nina e kauia. E teknau tolu na e whiri mo fotu ki he preanga Amerika. Koe mea koku mahu i ngā kohi koe konga lahi o e ngahi whetutaki ma ngahi alea wha preanga koia a tonga ki tua preanga. O whawhou ia he potungau e koe ki muri. Pea neongo o kuiai ai ofisi whaambastoa o Amerika ke ngai whanua koe Pasifiki. Ai wanga maheni koe tau whaalawat mi Tongani ki Suva. Tau te whito ke whaeke eke koia mo e ngahi whainga koia ki hangofua whalau ki Amerika pe koe visa. Ka koe la kanga wha oku au sia koe Tongani. Ko lawa ke foto i Tongani ai ofisi ia o e pureanga Amerika. Pea kui loa pia koe ofisi whaambastoa. Wai whake ngai si tepo ke heia o ku whaua e foto ofisi wha pureanga. Hange koe ana tau mata a hono uruaki i foto koea o e waangau e uruaki. Ai ni koe i he ofisi o e pange pure whawhanua koia a Tonga. Koe lawa e ono foto uai koe ni o e ofisi ke nau ngā ue ke ngai mea koe ni o hoko mai. Koe lakanga in hono ua o tau hoko mai ki ai. Koe a ahi mai ai Egg Minister ki muri koe a Amerika ki Tongani i a honi koe a ahi aho i taha mai pe. Aia o kune hanga lewa eia o whailongai koe a honi o kutoki whakahawa, whakaofisiare ai ofisi o Amerika i Tongani. Koe lau wike lewa mei heni pe koe hahono fuoloa, pe koe loloa e au lewa ke tuunga ko hono whakotuu e Amerika hane ambastoa i Tongani. Hange koe ko Tongani o koe ambastoa a Siapani i Tongani o koe moe ambastoa a Republika ko Siaina. Pea o kiai pea moe kau talawe kau lahi ka kohono tatau pe ka ngai tuunga wha ambastoa hange ko Australia hange ko New Zealand ko e talwhakaulai ko e Britania ki Tongani katoa ngai lakanga ko ia ka ngai lakanga takia o ngai whanua. Pea ko ngahi waa ko ia ko ngai ofisi ko ia o kunau whamalu ki nau tolu e potunga au e ko i ki muri. Ai ni a koe o i Tongani ai a ahi mai ai minister ki muri ko e a Amerika ko ngai ko lakanga mahu ingai a honi o whailonga ia i historia kona whakawa na ofisi ko i Tongani o tu pe ia i ofisi ko ia o e pange pule whawhanua ko e atonga i halasalo te ia i Whasimoiafi. Pea ko e pungpong e aho ni na e ia e ngai proklama keke talu pe me he kamataanga ko ia o i tu utamai o e minister ke malai wakapuna whamotu pea mo toenga ko ia e ne kau a ahi mai. Pea na e whahoko pea mo e tukupare he pongpong e aho ni ki he maka whamana tō ia he ku kei manatu ai tō lahi ko i ko e taulahi mamani ono urua ki pe ke taulahi mamani hono wa na e kaua Tongania whakataha mai whanki whanua ko e Pasifiki pe ke Australia mo New Zealand whamalmalu atu ki Amerika pea mo ngahi whanua kehe ngai ko ngā kau whakatahataha ko ia ko e me he wesi te e ko ngā kau whakatahataha ia ko e akitau tolu. Pea neongo ai wā mama o mo lau maire ko i tau nofo monu ia Tongani o koe hatau whangatoko ua pe koe whangatau kete tōke anga New Zealand mo Australia una ofi mai ka ko Amerika ko Britania France una hanga na tolo toka ngai mai a tau tolo ko i Tongani mo i toenga ko ia o ngai whanua ko ia i he Pasifiki pea ka ia whahinga whitutaki o tatau pe i ngai ngawe ki muri ko kinau tolo. Ko i tāwha ke konga mau inga ko hi ko i whitutaki wa awhi ko ia ai potunga au e tau molu whanua ko i a Amerika pia mo e potunga au e ko i Tongani ai kautau e ne awhio. Lahi au pite ngai proklama ako whakakautau o ko tau whikau aki ai pe o ko whaitoko nia ia me pole anga Amerika. Toke hanga France, New Zealand, Australia, ka koe ngahi monu koe kua Ausia, e ki nau tolu koe kakai Tonga. Pea koe keike ngata pe ai, hau he ngai mala e keke, ngai whainga maari e ako, koe ngai whainga maari e ki he mo ui, koe ngahi whainga maari e ki he tautai, koe ngai whainga maari e i he ekonomika, koe tau ngahi koloa keke, katoa ngahi mea ko ia ka kutokoni au pitoia. Ko e whainga maari e whako e nini ongo ke ki ahoi taha. Pea ku fu pupo au pito e polokalama ai au ku whakotutu mai au ku koe nehiri eni te maulawa lewa ki he o au ko ia ki hono whakahoko a hono whakotutu ko ia pea mo whakawa ai ofisi ko ia o Amerika ko i Tongani pe hangepe ko ni e whamawholahanga tonu atu pe moia. E whamalo ki e sekretari pule ma sekretari ko e ke kabineti Paula Mau pe a ko ia kune hanga toka ngai ko ia ai ofisi o ek paremia. Ko hiko e whanga mahari e ko na utau Mau ke whamawholahanga tonu ai polokalama ko ni o ko lolotonga whakahoko ai whakataha ai eiki minister ko Amerika pe mo eiki paremia pe ko ai makau minister e kabineti ko Tongani pe foka teknau tolo na Moimoi folau mai i he minister ke muri ko Amerika na rotonga whakataha i loki kabineti i he taimini o ko whafofua ko e miniti nai e hongofulu ki he tānima me heni i heni ai ai e paremia ka uma afoki ai minister ki muri koe a Amerika i he loki konferenisi koeni i he whare whapure anga St. George ke whahoko ai whakaike eke mo ngai kautaha mitia o mau i heni pe mo ngai kautaha mitia ke a Tongani pe koe pe mo nau tolu na nau flau mai pe nau tolu i he i ahi koni ai minister ki muri ko Amerika pe po os fai mai pe frahino hino pe ko tala mai ko e katoa ka whaingon ko a Amerika pau ke nau hanga na toria o whapapaui ko nau whiwhihu i pe e ua whai koho no whihui. Pata mai lewa ka mau tolu koe ni ai kau whaingongo I tongani ke mau tala noa pe ai pe foi whihui e ua. Kua winga whoki ia oku wawe au pito pe ai whakatahai ai aku whafofua mahalo ke I miniti pe ia nai e uanima pe hawhi hoa ai ki whakataha koe ni pe a kapau te mo mea mai mahalo ka whihui pe e whai koho no eke pakpau pe whoke mau talangofua ki he ngai mea ko whaka ofa au pito ia pakonu ko mau osi lau pe ai ngai mea mau inga koe ke whai no eke whihui pe ua pe angalewa ai whainga maari ke kau whaingo ka a Amerika ke nau ai pe manau whihui e ua ko hinga he koe eke minister mo ni kau wholau e fie mau ia ke nau I he malai wakapuna wha motu ko I taimia ko o e nau whoki atu ia nau tolu o mawahe atu ia mei tongani I he taimi tolu. Ai au nau I tonga pena toi lau hoa na nau tu uta mai pe I he taimi ono ane uhu pa te nau whoki atu pena tolu ia I he taimi tolu ho ata e fiafi ia o e ahoni hiri ai proklama wha osi e whakahoko ia ki he mata whanga o ko whailonga ia mea e kau ngai ofa Amerika koe ki tongani. Pea koe taha ia I he whetutaki lelei koe a tongani pea moe pureanga Amerika pea pehe moe toenga koe ngai whanua koe ia o e Pasifiki e tau inasi koe talo mei ane whi. Ai holoi toonga mai e whalau mai kau ngai ofa Amerika ia ngai mala e keke. Mala e whawhaito o koe toko lai taha koe kau whaiako. Nau whaiako e ngā iako e pule anga pe ke ngahi iako anga tau taha ngā iako koe SCSC o ku nau whalau mai he ngahi tawhaaki koe tokoni ki ngai mea I he whale I whaka ekonomika koe mala e koe ngōwe koe tautai koe ngahi tawhaaki ke kehe pe aku malawa lewa he ngahi kau taha business ia ke nau whaia nau tohi kore ki he kautanga e ofa koe Amerika I tongani o ave ki aha whakotu ka pau ko te whemau ha toho taha ki tokoni mai ki te ngāwe ia ngai mea whaka accounting ka pau o kuia hani I pehe whakotu lewa hingoa e ngai kautaha ko ia pe aku tau wha ilo koe ngai waa keke hangi koe koe ngai waa ngau e ke mo uirelei mohu I he ngahi tale niti ke kehe o ku tau whetokoni a kiai. Pe au kiai pepe mo whainga maali o e whawhetongi kau whaiako ma ngai tuunga ko ia. Ka koe pongpongia o e ahoni, ko ne lava pe koe ni a e whakataha ma kehe o ko whakahoko. Ko lawe e atu ki he whakataha koe ni o toi kau mai ki ai a e eki minister koe ki mori a tongani. Pe he whoki ki he eki minister mo ui ko e eki minister ko ia ki he ngahi ngau e whakalakalaka wha ekonomika pe ko tau iloa pe tau tolu ko e potu ngau e leipa hini mo minister ko ia pe ki he ngahi tawhaaki ke mo kau ofisa pe ai pule anga tenau whenga e aki o tokoni ke ono whakahoko o ngahi whatongia mo ngahi ngau e koe ni tau te whito ki a ngahi whakamatala o fie mau ke whai ahono tokanga e kina. E mahu inga au pito ho mo Moimoi mai pe I he tau prokalama ko ia pongpongi o ahoni ko uhi foki ke mo lava o inasi I ngahi whamatala mo ngahi mea ko ia e tuku mai o makatuunga I a whihui foi whihui e wha o hangi koe neo lawe ki ei e tuku ato me ngai kautaha mitia koe ni ko he ngai whainga maali e nia o ka hamolo fia ia ke mau pea koe a ai mai fokia koe ni ke ngai mea whapore anga kautau fia lahi ko ia ki whainga maali e ma ai ngai kautaha tu whake o ngongo mo whamatala ko hi neongo e ne no ai taimi ka iai pea ki whainga maali ke whai ha ki whihui o makatuunga pe ko hi ko e tuunga koe ni o kutau iai pea pehe foki ke ngā hinga au e whakalakalaka o ko whakahoko o ko wakai he fofoki ke whakataha koe ni ko rotonga whakahoko he loki i kabineti o ko iai pea moe Eke Minister koe potunga au e paanga ka e uma a foki a e whafofonga ko ia o Tongatapu o Walu pea pehe foki ka toa ka o Eke Minister ko ni ko ka whafofonga ia o ngahi vahenga o kuna wahanga whafofonga i pea pehe foki ko kuna tolu ko ngahi hoa ngā ue te whito ia o ngahi area o ku hoko pe foke ngai polokalama ko ni e taimi hano ko toa pe taimi o ku me atuhai e ka utaki ko e mitonga ni ki tō pureanga Moimoi wholau ai i anga mahe ni a ki nau tōlu me ngai potunga e pureanga hange pe koe wholau ai mai koe ni minister ki muri a Amerika o ku Moimoi wholau mai ai mo ki nau tōlu mei he pureanga Amerika pia koe whainga maali e koe ni neongo pe foki e ai Facebook ka ia moi media wha sosiale whai e whitu utaki pa neongo pe moi e-maili moi telefoni mo ngahi mea pehe ka o koe kai tatau ia mo e whemātāki. Ko e whemātāki koe ni o whai ai whesi o whaki o tala noa mahi noai mo ha whahinga mea te nauhanga o whehui pea o whainga maari ha tongani ki ngai whakotuu. Mantui whako e whupureanga Amerika ia o tau o si ilo kone pepe Amerika pea o ku tau whakaukau tato ke nau maana tole mea ko tape. Pakusai e nau lava me koe ki tongani ke nau wakai tonu ke anga koe e tūkunga ho tau whonuani pea mo e o atu lewa mo e ngahi whie mau ka pau o kuala whainga maari e. Pea koe konga mau inga hange koe ko tau ka inga mo tau kakai koe toko lahi ho tau ka inga tonga o kunau i henga fua whatongia ngai ta whaakekehia i Amerika. Ka kohono lelei ko e ni au tau inu mia e tau toru i tongani. He neongo i tau nofo wa mama o ka koe nau ofa o ku tau lawenga monua. Pak pehe e tau fiefia. Ko inga e tau fiefia ko tau whamalo. I ke iai pe ngahi whainga maalie o tau inasi ai. O inasi ho tau ka inga koe i Amerika pa tau inasi ai i tongani. Ko tahe ngahi polokalama whakalakalaka ko ni koe ai pureanga Amerika ka kuwhawhau mai ia i he waa o ki loa whakanomno be ko he PIDP be ko he Pacific Islands Development Program. Aia koe waa ko ni koe waa mau inga ia. O kune hanga ia o mei ke whotutu ai ngahi ka venga mau inga pe koe taimlahe u whātuu ma tuku mai ia ki he whakataanga whapare mia koe a ngai whanua e Pasifiki. Koe tau whanonga tēnā tau tōlu ia ki he whakataha whapare mia hono hoko ai au ko amlake whahoko ia i mahina katuu. E kau ai ripoti ma ke heia me whakataanga koe ni o whahoko i tongani i haka venga mau inga e o hake. I he taimi koe e whae whakataha whapare mia pea e toi whai ahono whehui o ka pau e iaha whahinga palani e whakatoka heni pei whehui le whai wahau mau pēa kau whafofonga ia ki ai ka koe polokalama koe ni koe ni o lawe ki ai pe koe PIDP ai o ofisia i East West Center i ono lulu Hawaii o ko whakatoka ai ai ngahi ngawe a ngā peheni koe ofisi koe ia ne anga mai ni ake tare ki tai toke tā Steven Alapua ka kone pekia ka uma a foki Hu'akavameiliku ne o kone pekia i loko ko toke tā Langkavaliku nani os ia i East West Center i ngai lakanga mga hi whatongia ko ia koe ahoni ko Hu'akavameiliku eni pia moe kau minister mo kau taki koe pureanga koe hoko lelei ai peia o e seini o te keike motu ia e ngahi whetu taki peheni pa koe monu ia kia te tau tolu. Koe tau whanonga i taim lai hange koe ko tau kainga tonga o kunau i Amerika hange ko New Zealand hange ko Australia me mika ngai taimi koe whetong pule anga o ku tau whahanga i tau toria o whakaamua pe hange mai a prokalama ia koe hange pēa hangai foi whautu maari e whakapolitikare ke o hange hangofua pe koe whoaki ano whawhanua, o whahoko ko hoko pea I he kōhiri. Hangoi ko mātolu koe ni e kau whaya ngongo, ka pau na e lahi e whainga maria koe ke eke ai ngahi mea koe, e kai ke tae kau atu moe, eke ia mea koe ia, pe ko wawe mai hano, he kuna whangale tolo ai me wā tau whē, ke wā tau whē, o tipeni ai, e oange ngahi whainga maria. Ko le koti wha Moimoi taha, pe koe mea pe whakau pau ke hoko, ko le koti wha Moimoi taha, a I loa mai ho tau kai ngā, I ngahi ngā oere rei, he ngai whanua koe I toa pore anga, ko e ngahi mea, anga maheni au pitoia, pe au tau whamalo mo whawhetai. He tau whawofua pe ka pau na I kei kia whenga maari e ia, ke lava to tau tokolahi, ki toa pore anga, o whahoko ai e ngahi whatongia, mo I ngahi ngā ue I ai. Ka kilo pe te tau whewhe, o ngā ko tau ki whanua, o ko kai ke ngata I ene sisi, pea o ko ikai, e kai ke fu te tau fu tokolahi. Ka ko lava koe ke vai atu ke ngahi whanua a peheni, pe au tau whamalo ai. Kai ke he, hange whako ia ne o lave ke ane nai ange, pe koe ngahi momenitsi pe mei heni, ko hoko atu ki he ngahi whakawhehu I koia e whakahoko, pia ko smau pe mo whewhehu e ua e kau whaiangongo koe a Amerika, pia pe whoki mo whewhehu e ua a ki tau tolu koe I tongani ke toko ato ki a teknau tolu. Toko kehe o ka pau e toe ririu ai taimi ia, ka koe angaia ai toko koe ai polokalama ki he lolo tongani, ko tau ki whanua koe ki whanua sisi. Peak mahino pe ia e tau toko si mo hange u tau masive siva kau tau koloa ia. O hinga u tau koloa ia ai, ko I ngā o kei tūtai pe ai mea hono kotoa. Tūtai e whare o ha mohe ofa. Lelei au pita mo I whahako whatongia ai pure anga. Hange koe a koe siasi o whai hono whakalotolahi. Mo e tuku tāpua ki mai ka tek tau tolu kotoa. Pako tau tole ka kai e whanua ki o kokoat. Koe nok mea mai e pare mea Tonga Hu'akavameiliku. Ka maa foki. Ai ek minister ko ia. O e preanga Amerika. Antony Blinken. Pea mo e toenga. Ke kamata. Ai programa.
Ta mo to ma fafi. Ta puki he tu o Tonga king tu powon. Au ma kuina na spa mo fa de ha mo. O kore pen ke u hufanga ngai whatapu wha au whaki. Kai whahau kon mua ai tau talanoa koni he pongpongi ni I e rea whapapalangi. It is a great honor to warmly welcome to the Kingdom of Tonga the Secretary of State of the United States of America, Mr. Antony Blinken. Thank you. The visit today by Secretary Blinken is historic. It is the first visit by a sitting U.S. Secretary of State to Tonga. It is the highest level visit we have received from the United States government in our recent history. It is a clear indication to us of the desire and commitment by the United States of America to strengthen relations between our two countries. Mr. Secretary, once again, thank you for visiting Tonga. Ladies and gentlemen, Secretary Blinken and I have just concluded a rich but also very frank exchange on key areas of partnership. Our partnership is grounded on our shared respect for democracy, the rule of law, and the rights and freedom of others. We covered many aspects of our partnership, including the need for countries to raise commitment to tackling climate crisis. We agree that education is an important component. In addition, we acknowledge the changing global landscape, the impacts of conflict, and the strategic importance of Pacific Island region. We agree that working together, guided by strategies such as the Pacific 2050 strategy, would be key to ensuring that ours remain a region of peace, security, and prosperity. The United States and the Kingdom of Tonga enjoy a long-standing and enduring partnership. A strength of that partnership is the people-to-people links, and we appreciate and acknowledge the important and valuable contribution from the United States Peace Corps. Last year, we celebrated a milestone, 50 years of diplomatic relations with the United States, and welcomed the announcement by Vice President Kamala Harris of the United States' decision to establish its first diplomatic mission here in the Kingdom. Today, I congratulated the Secretary for their work, undertaken together with our officials, and who worked tirelessly, might I add, to ensure that the U.S. Embassy was set up in record time. In May this year, we hoisted for the very first time the flag of the United States in Nuku'alofa at a remarkable and historic event marking the establishment of the embassy. Secretary Blinken is in Nuku'alofa to preside over the dedication ceremony for the embassy. I've told the Secretary that the establishment of the U.S. Embassy and his presence here today is a testament to the fact that our partnership is growing from strength to strength. The people of the Kingdom of Tonga and His Majesty's government are deeply grateful for the United States government assistance towards our recovery efforts, especially following the Hu'akavameiliku volcanic eruption and the ensuing tsunami. We will proceed to the dedication ceremony of the U.S. Embassy, another milestone in the Tonga-US relations. Our partnership enjoys a strong defense component. Tonga has contributed significantly to international peace and security, particularly in support of the United States troops, firstly deploying soldiers to Iraq, and then in 2010, Tonga deployed the first contingent of 55 soldiers to Afghanistan in support of the British Armed Forces efforts in the International Security Assistance Force. But our defense relations go back even further. World War II, Tonga hosted U.S. military forces on the main island. We became a major transit hub for Allied shipping lanes during the war. At one point, there were more U.S. Marines in Tonga than there were Tongans. And this is a testimony to how two countries, whether big or small, can and must work together to pursue of our shared values for freedom and democracy. More importantly, it is a reminder of the enduring links Tonga and the United States share. The Secretary and I had the opportunity to look at a range of renewed and strengthened areas for our partnership. I've asked the Secretary to expedite the visa processing facilities here in Nuku'alofa. The high costs associated with visa application to the United States currently processed in Suva puts great strains on Tongan families. We also discussed working together to mitigate problems with IUU, deportees, and also trafficking in persons, and of course, cybersecurity. Finally, we agreed to continue high-level dialogue between our Pacific leaders and President Biden. This will be key to ensuring our partnership and shared agenda for our region continue to be strengthened. And I look forward to our second U.S.-Pacific summit between our Pacific leaders and President Biden in September. This is very important given the fact that Tonga will be taking up the chairmanship of the Pacific Island Forum for the next year. Mr. Secretary, once again, thank you for making time in your very busy schedule to visit Tonga, and I look forward to our continued efforts to achieve shared goals for the benefits of both our peoples. Thank you. And now I'd like to invite the Secretary to make a statement.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. And let me first thank the Honorable Hu'akavameiliku for his hospitality. It's no surprise, Honorable Prime Minister, that your country is known as the Friendly Islands. We've experienced that even in the brief time that we've been here already. I am very happy to return to the Pacific Islands. This is my third time in the Pacific Islands as Secretary of State, but to make my first visit to Tonga. And indeed, as the Honorable Prime Minister said, this is actually the first visit by a member of the U.S. Cabinet to visit Tonga. We are fellow Pacific nations with an incredibly rich history, as you've heard the Prime Minister allude to, but as important, a shared future. President Biden is fully committed to working with Tonga and with all Pacific Islands to usher in a new era of even closer collaboration, to deliver on the issues that matter most to our people, rooted in mutual respect and mutual trust. This partnership is vital to making real a shared vision for the region and the broader Indo-Pacific, a region that's open, that's free, that's connected, that's prosperous, that's secure, that is resilient. When we talk about free and open, We mean a region where all countries are free to choose their own path and their own partners, where problems are dealt with openly, where rules are reached transparently and applied fairly, where goods, where ideas, where people can move freely and lawfully. Last year, President Biden launched the first ever U.S. Pacific Island Summit to bring the voices and perspectives of Pacific Island leaders, including the Honorable Prime Minister, directly to the Oval Office. And we look very much forward to continuing that work by hosting a second summit in Washington later this year. At last year's summit, our countries issued the U.S. Pacific Partnership Declaration, committing us to work together to address the challenges of our time and to seize the opportunities of our partnership. As part of that commitment, we announced over $810 million to support programs in the Pacific Islands like Tonga. That includes nearly $500 million to manage the growing effects of the climate crisis, an immediate existential challenge in the Pacific, a daily reality in Tonga. We're strengthening our partnership on other priorities for Tonga and for the region, including on clean energy and sustainable infrastructure so that we can reach a net zero future, maritime security so that we can ensure a peaceful and stable future for the Pacific, digital transformation so that we can build open, interoperable, reliable, and secure online infrastructure and connect people better, and what we call people-centered development so that we can drive inclusive economic growth that lifts everyone. These are all areas of focus of the 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific continent. To better understand the needs of our Pacific partners and to carry out our shared efforts, we're building up our diplomatic capacity in the region. In May, we took a major step in that direction by opening our embassy here in Nuku'alofa, which the Prime Minister and I will formally dedicate today. We also set up our embassy in the Solomon Islands. We're working to establish posts in Vanuatu and in Kiribati. Today, as you heard the Honorable Prime Minister say, we discussed concrete ways to carry forward this momentum. That includes building on our work to strengthen our bilateral relationship, none more significant than opening the new embassy. We also talked about the importance of the return of the Peace Corps to Tonga. For over half a century, volunteers have worked alongside local communities to bolster the capacity of teachers, to conserve rainwater, to combat ocean pollution and the erosion of coral reefs, and even turn trash into construction material that can be used for sustainable building. What's so powerful about the program, too, is that it has built lifelong bonds between Tongans and thousands of American volunteers. And later today, I'll have an opportunity to meet the newest cohort of Peace Corps volunteers. The Honorable Prime Minister and I also talked about how we can strengthen the engagement of other partners on shared Pacific priorities. Another initiative last year launched by President Biden is something called the Partners in the Blue Pacific, to better coordinate efforts on issues that matter most to communities across the region. When I travel after here to New Zealand and then to Australia, I'll discuss with my counterparts ways to advance that work, including on maritime security and on illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. We know that this is, in many places, devastating livelihoods, doing terrible damage to ecosystems, and together with our partners in the Blue Pacific, an area where we're going to intensely focus our efforts. Later today, when we dedicate the new embassy, the United States and Tonga will mark a new chapter in our relationship. I look forward to continuing to build a closer, stronger future between our countries so that we, together, can deliver for our people, not just now, but for generations to come. Thank you very much.
Maro. And now we're going to open up the floor for questions. We're only going to take 4 questions, 2 from the Tonga press and 2 from the foreign press. And with that, we'll probably alternate, 1 from the Tonga press and then the foreign press. And so the first one, I'll give it to the local press if you want to.
Paula, Mr. Secretary, Mr. Prime Minister. My question is directed to you, Mr. Secretary. How confident are you with your relationship with Tonga in light of other interests from other countries in the Pacific? And then coming to what you just said, you are opening up or you are witnessing the opening of the embassy of the United States in Tonga. Then after after that you're going to appoint a permanent ambassador to Tonga, resident here in Tonga. What will be your priority after that to Tonga? Politics or immigration? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. First, with regard to the embassy, we very much look forward to having a permanently confirmed ambassador to Tonga. That's something we're very actively working on now. My expectation is we'll have someone to nominate in very short order, and then of course we have to work through the United States Senate to get that person confirmed. But you will see someone as ambassador permanently running the embassy here in Tonga. And I have to say, the very fact of that embassy is both symbolic and practical. Symbolic in that it attests to the importance that we attach to the relationship between the United States and Tonga. Practical because in terms of doing so much of what you've heard the Honorable Prime Minister and myself talk about today, that will happen through the day in, day out contact that we're able to have as a result of having an embassy here. The Prime Minister referenced the historic summit meeting that we had in Washington with President Biden over 3 days, where we had leaders from Pacific Island countries come together in Washington. But as I shared with the Prime Minister, as important as those 3 days are, it's the 362 days that follow in the year that make all the difference in terms of actually following through on the work that we're doing together. What President Biden is intensely focused on is listening to our partners, understanding what it is on a very practical level that we can do as partners to help make a difference in the lives of people in the Pacific Islands. And that's the agenda that we have, and that's the agenda that the embassy will carry out. We've talked about the imperative of combating climate change. The United States is determined to be a strong partner in that effort. We've made in the United States the biggest historic investment in combating climate change through something we call the Inflation Reduction Act in history, but the benefits of those investments will be felt around the world. We're also making sure that we're doing our part in contributing to the necessary funds so that countries are able to help pay for adaptation and build resilience. We talked a lot about that today and the need to do even more here in the Pacific Islands. We're historically the largest emitter in the world. We're now the number 2 emitter, so we take very seriously our responsibilities, both to take the steps necessary to keep warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, but also to make sure that our partners have the resources they need, the technical expertise, the technology that they need to confront this challenge. Through the Partnership for the Blue Pacific as well, bringing in other countries, we're engaged in initiatives that also will help deal with climate change. We talked about the challenge of illegal fishing, unreported, unregulated fishing. As I mentioned, this is something we know is doing terrible damage to people's livelihoods, to ecosystems. It also is potentially a threat to security. We're building up abilities to deal with that, to identify it, to deal with it, to build what we call maritime domain awareness so that all countries in the Pacific have an understanding about what's going on in the waters that surround them so that they can protect the livelihoods and protect their security. We're looking at ways to strengthen our education partnerships. We talked about that as well today. We're gratified that we have 70,000 Tongans living in the United States. We have that powerful connectivity as well. But the most important thing is through our diplomacy that we really understand what it is that is a priority for people here throughout the Pacific Islands and what we can do as partners in a very concrete way to help meet those needs, meet those priorities. We had the terrible disaster with the volcanic eruption and the tsunami. We were gratified to be able to be of assistance, but now as a practical matter, one of the initiatives we have is to do what we would call humanitarian warehousing to make sure that the supplies and other things that might be needed in a future emergency are readily available on hand so that a response can be immediate and doesn't have to wait. Anyway, there are a long list of things that we're working on together, but it's all driven by focusing on what's concrete, what can really make a difference in people's lives. I was recently in Indonesia, and there's a proverb in Indonesia that says, God has given us one mouth but two ears. And that emphasizes the importance of really listening to each other and making sure that we understand what it is our friends need and how we can help.
And with that, I'll take the first one from the foreign press.
Vivian.
Thank you so much, Mr. Secretary. Your Excellency, thank you for hosting us in your beautiful country. I'll start with you, a quick question. I think the Secretary had mentioned Solomon Islands. Solomon Islands entered into a security pact also with China last year. Tonga has one of 3 militaries here in the Pacific Island region. So can you talk about whether or not your country is exploring deepening its security relationship with China, whether or not a security pact similar to the one the Solomon Islands struck last year is on the table here, or whether or not you've chosen to align more with the U.S. and its regional allies like Australia? And for you, Mr. Secretary, 2 questions, if you will. China's President Xi Jinping removed his hand-picked foreign minister after less than 7 months on the job. How might this impact efforts to build on the recent progress you made during your trip to Beijing last month? And secondly, Israeli protesters were met in the streets this week by water cannons after Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu began overhauling the country's judicial system. The U.S. has long praised Israel as a valued democratic partner in the region. What do the recent events in Israel tell you about the state of Israel's democracy? Thanks.
I'll start and then please. We recognize Solomon Islands sovereignty. With regards to the security arrangement or agreement, we haven't had any discussion on actually having such agreement in place. Our relationship is basically right now about development issues such as infrastructure development and so forth.
Vivian, with regard to China, of course, it's China's sovereign decision to decide who their foreign minister is. Qin Gang was ambassador to Washington. I got to know him when he was ambassador. I had constructive conversations with him in his role as foreign minister, and I wish him well. But I've also known Wang Yi for more than a decade. I've met with him repeatedly in my current capacity as Secretary of State, and including, as you know, just recently in Jakarta. And I anticipate being able to work well with him as we have in the past. We'll continue to engage him. We'll continue to engage other Chinese officials. As we've said, it is important for us to manage this relationship responsibly. That starts with diplomacy, that starts with engaging, and I will work with whoever the relevant Chinese counterpart is. And I'm sorry, on Israel. Look, I think what we're seeing is an extraordinarily vibrant democracy, and we're seeing that on a daily basis. We're seeing people make known their views. As a great friend of Israel's, we've made known our own views, and as President Biden has said, when it comes to something as significant as the reforms that they're engaging in, it would be preferable to do it in a way that builds consensus, that brings as many people along as possible. That's the way to have something that's genuinely sustainable. But I think what we're seeing in Israel now remains a reflection of its very strong, very vibrant democracy.
Greetings, Mr. Secretary. My question is on the current geopolitical climate in the Pacific. It's a given fact that the U.S. is very much more present now in the Pacific Partnership Strategy, the newly established U.S. Embassy in Tonga, the official visits. My question is, why now? Some are thinking or even saying that it's more for an U.S. agenda and less for Tonga and what Tonga wants from the U.S. What is your response to that kind of statement? Thank you.
The simple reality is this: we're a Pacific nation. It's something that President Biden feels very strongly, and it's been very consistent in his own approach even before he was president. And we very much see the future in the Indo-Pacific region writ large. So this is a place where we're going to be present, we're going to be engaged, because we have not only a long shared history, but more important in a sense now, for all of us is we see a shared future. And this is not about any other country. It is about the partnerships that we believe it's in our interest to build with countries throughout the Pacific. We've had, as I think you've seen, sustained engagement throughout this administration. I mentioned this is my third trip to the Pacific Islands in this job. We've opened new embassies now in Solomon Islands, Tonga. We're looking as well at Vanuatu and Kiribati. We've developed initiatives both on a bilateral basis with our friends in Tonga, but also through the Pacific Islands Forum, through the Partners of the Pacific. And as I was saying earlier, our intense focus is on how can we be the best and strongest partners in terms of being responsive to the needs of people throughout the Pacific Islands. That's why we've been spending so much time. It's why we're increasing our diplomatic presence so that we can really, on a day in, day out basis, hear and listen to the needs and challenges. And that's then reflected in the work that we're actually doing. And what I hear from countries in the region, and I think my colleagues hear from countries in the region as they're traveling around, is that people would like partnerships with the United States. And simply put, we're trying to answer that call.
If I can just add to what the Secretary mentioned, the fact that, I mean, Tonga, we have been asking the United States to actually have a presence here for a very long time. And last year was the 50th year of our diplomatic ties between the United States and Tonga. And Vice President Kamala Harris actually announced the setting up of the embassy. And we had an opportunity to actually had a meeting in Papua New Guinea a couple months back. And it kind of developed from there, whereby we would like to actually have a high-level visit from the United States so we can have some discussion on the bilateral arrangement, not just the dedication of the embassy, but an opportunity to have a discussion on the issues that the Secretary mentioned, and I alluded to, and I think that actually helped in strengthening our relation, having a better understanding of the expectation between our two countries. I take one for
Michael Birnbaum, Washington Post.
Hi, thanks. Michael Birnbaum from the Washington Post. Mr. Prime Minister, you mentioned just now your shared commitment to freedom and democracy shared with the United States. The outgoing president of Micronesia said in March that China had been engaging in political warfare in his country on a range of issues. Looking at your debt situation, among other issues, I was wondering if you feel China is doing the same thing in your country, and how worried are you, separately, how worried are you about conflict between the United States and China in your region? And for you, Mr. Secretary, to get into this building today, you had to walk under a sign that said China Aid. This building was built with a grant from the Chinese government. We've seen signs of Chinese presence all across this island, this country. Is the United States late to the game here? And should Tongan citizens expect the U.S. government to be able to match China's presence? Separately, one last question. We've seen the news that Trevor Reed has been injured fighting in Ukraine. Can you tell us more about his details, the situation, the extent to which the U.S. government is involved in his care right now? And are you concerned that this is going to jeopardize your efforts to gain the freedom of Evan Gershkovich and Paul Whelan? Thank you.
Thanks.
I'll start off. With regards to our debt to China, we have started this year to actually start paying off our debt to China. We don't have any problems or concerns with regards to that. I'll pass on to the Secretary the rest of your questions.
Michael, on first part of the question, we have no objection to the investments by or engagements by any other country, including China. On the contrary, if it's done in a productive way, if it really is responsive to the needs of people, if it helps generate a race to the top with others wanting to help out, that's a good thing. I think the concerns that we've had really go to a few things that I think we've seen across the board in some of the investments. And the imperative of making sure that they're done transparently, according to the rule of law, with sustainable financing, alluded to the debt situation of some countries, and with respect for the autonomy of aid recipients, so that there aren't political strings attached to any investments that are being made. And again, I think one of the things that we've seen is that as China's engagement in the region has grown, there has been some, from our perspective, increasingly problematic behavior, including at the same time the assertion of unlawful maritime claims, something that I've raised extensively when I was in China, the militarization of disputed features, for example, in the South China Seas, some predatory economic activities, and also investments that are done in a way that can actually undermine good governance and promote corruption. So it's not the fact of, it's the nature of that we think is important to focus on. But countries make their sovereign decisions about with whom they want to do business or seek investment or assistance. We respect those sovereign decisions. But again, we're concerned about some of the implications in the way that some of this investment is done. And I would hope that whether it's China or anyone else, that we all do this according to the highest standards. And that, as I said, we have a race to the top, not a race to the bottom. With regard to Trevor Reed, yes, so I've seen the reports that he was injured in Ukraine. I don't have any more information on his condition or status. But as a general proposition, it underscores why we continue to call on Americans not to travel to Ukraine and not to fight there. In terms of what the implications are for our efforts to bring home Evan Gershkovich or Paul Whelan, it shouldn't have any effect. As I've noted before, even with countries where we have profound differences, and almost by definition, countries that are arbitrarily detaining or unlawfully detaining Americans are usually countries with which we have profound differences, we've managed to find ways to bring Americans home. Since the start of this administration, we brought home 29 Americans who were being arbitrarily detained in close to 10 or so countries. And again, these are countries with which typically we've had difficult relations. So my expectation is that even as we're dealing with all sorts of other challenges in our relationship with Russia, we will and we are determined to continue to work to bring both Evan and Paul home. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Press. I look forward to seeing you at the embassy. Paula,
Thank you.
Secretary.
Thank you so much.
Antony Blinken ko e Minister ke muli ko ya Amerika kai ke ko no whakaiki I lea whatonga te mautuka te hongo ngā pongpongi pa ko o te whamalo ho mo mea mai ko hinga koe wawe koe taimi ko kau ngā oe tatau pe lawa atu ki ona whakawa koe ofisi ka ko te whamalo I he tau kau whataha I he polo kalama whawhunga I peak mautona la mai mi wal fit poinima Lady Luciane Luani pe ki a si la waka kai o maa foki a me sake whamokioa ko whatawhehi tuifua I he polokalama ko ia mei he whalen ka oa te whamalo te mauto e hoko atu ki e ofisi whapureanga ko Amerika kai malo ho mo mea mai ka mo mea